Honorable Premier of Montserrat, Eastern Farrell Taylor, Honorable Vincent Quigley, Minister of Health, the BVI, other honorable ministers and honorable members of Parliament who may be present that I am unaware of. And our esteemed panelists, Honorable Dr. Carl Dawson, Honorable Kerizine Z. James, she's on her way.
It's all right.
You can depend on us.
Dr. Dawson is not present.
Okay. Honorable Dr. Carl Dawson is not present with us, but we recognize that he was expected to be one of our panelists. Honorable Gwendel Mercellini, our other distinguished speaker presenter, Honorable Milagros D. Campos, our distinguished speaker presenter Travis Sinclair, and I bring regrets for Mr. Chamberlain Emmanuel, Head of Environmental Sustainability Cluster, OECS Commission. Regrettably, he is unwell. Other excellencies. Growing up, little seaside village called Kingsale, the mother, single parent with 3 children, she always warned us, do not play with fire. It's a good servant, but a bad master. She also warned us, remember, I hold the handle of the knife and you hold the blade. You pull, you get cut. I pull, you get cut. As I grew into a woman, getting into law and legislation, I recognized that there are 2 other jewels that we must take into account, and that is legislation. Legislation can make you, it can break you, and you better be careful who holds the knife, blade, or the handle when you create legislation. I also recognize, even more so, that money makes the mill go round. And today, as we are going to present to you our OPCC side event at SIDS4, Climate Change and Environmental Legislation in support of the delivery of the new program of action for SIDS, I am quite sure you will agree with me that one of the things we've been hearing about is money. And we are proposing to you that if we create the right legislation, it becomes a key to opening the door for funding, which we in SIDS have agreed is necessary. We are all here, but the discourse has been global. And therefore, in our considerations of our legislation, we must remember that we live local, but we must think global, and we must act global. With legislation, we can unleash the power combined with data. No longer must we be data impoverished, but data rich. Our future depends on this. I have had the pleasure of attending the side event for Pan Americas. And we have some strong parliamentarians I dare say, I must tell you, they were women. And so we are committed to transforming our societies as parliamentarians. And I want you to take note, I said parliamentarians as opposed to politicians or government. Because we must create strong parliaments, effective parliaments that create legislation that positively impact the lives of our people, our islands, and the world. So parliamentarians, particularly, I'm addressing you today to be strong and courageous. And our civil society who have joined us, all our NGOs, you elected us. So advocate and let us know that our duty is to our people first. You may not be pleased with me, not political parties, but the people whom you put your hands up and you took your oath to protect and to serve. And so today, as we advance, I want to encourage us that together we are stronger. I felt that power in our civil side event, where we had collaboration and the commitment. And one of the things we need to also do that we were strongly challenged on is to start from the grassroots. And therefore, each one of you today, you will go outside. I'm not asking, I'm commanding. You will go outside your normal realm to build the education and the awareness of climate change and the just transition to net zero. Whether it's a school, a church, a man on the road, whoever it is, reach out, because we need the education of our people so that they understand that which we are confronted with and that which confronts our very existence. I urge you as well that out of all of this, let us be bold and let us embrace solution-driven ideas. No more talk shop. We must leave a legacy for the generations to come. And that history be kind to us, this generation, that we have come, we saw, and we made a positive impact. As we continue our battle together, climate change, just transition, we do that because I believe we care. And as I would say, and we would say in Montserrat, together we shall, together we must, together we are more than well able. It is one for all and all for one. It is my esteemed pleasure to welcome all of you to this side event of the OPCC, Climate Change and Environmental Legislation in support of the delivery of the new program of action for SIDS. And so I will continue by welcoming our first speaker, and that is none other than our Director of ECLAC, Deanne Wallace. Director, the floor is yours.
Thank you so very much, Madam Moderator, Honorable Dr. Hector, for that very stimulating and thought-provoking introduction. And I'm going to say, after Honorable Natalia Wheatley, our Premier, who is a co-collaborator of our our event today. All protocols observed because there are just so many wonderful persons that I would want to record. I'm going to shout out a couple, because I see a parliamentarian from Jamaica in the back there, Senator Sophie Binns Fraser. Yes. I see Ambassador Bessemer Williams hiding in the back there. Yes. Premier Easton Taylor is a member of the CDCC Bureau right now, so he's a very special person for ECLAC. Only about 3 weeks ago, I was on a panel on just transitions in Trinidad and Tobago with my Kumbolo here, Luana Haynes, who is head of climate analytics for the Caribbean. And I'm very happy that she made it here. Benito, of course, is an ancient and dear friend, advisor to the Premier. I see my fishman over here, Milton Norton, and Devon had come in, but so we have a really wonderful group of persons here to participate in this discussion, which is so important, which is so vital for our future. Thank you also very much for coming and braving the heat. Yes, so this heat is a serious thing, Now, so we are here at SIDS4, very important gathering of the international community that happens only once every 10 years. Oh, you're sitting right in front of me and ignored you. Forgive me, darling. Very vitally important gathering of the international community meeting that happens only once every 10 years, that allows you the opportunity to turn the spotlight on the unique challenges that we as small island states must grapple with if we are to survive and to thrive. So I really hope that you've been able to, participate in some of these side events and in some of the dialogues. I was in a meeting yesterday with the Secretary General. This was his special consultation on finance, and when he finished with his prepared statement, he grabbed his Secretary General thing and said, "No, I stopped talking as Secretary General. This is me talking from the heart." This was the Secretary General. And then he started to push his punches. It was just awesome. I was absolutely exhilarated by the passion and the defense of the Secretary General of SIDS. There have been these kinds of discussions that we've had during the course of the week so far, and we're only at day 3. Of course, most compelling have been the discussions on our high vulnerability to climate change and its related impacts and the straitjackets that so many of our countries find themselves in because of the overwhelming burden of debt and debt servicing that has stifled opportunities for investment in adaptation and resilience, even as our middle-income and upper-income countries are denied access to concessional financing to promote growth and prosperity for our people. So this is SIDS time. This is time for us to make our voices heard, time to insist that we be treated justly and equitably. We've heard every strident call for reform of the global financial architecture that grants us access to the resources and mechanisms that we need. As I heard from the Prime Minister of St. Kitts yesterday, he said, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. So this is a fight we cannot afford to lose. I'm truly pleased to see that the Parliamentary Observatory on Climate Change and Just Transition, which is OPCC, is a part of this significant gathering of SIDS and the global community, since its missions and ideals are absolutely essential to the future survival of our islands and to the well-being of our peoples. For this initiative seeks to promote and support national effort to achieve net zero carbon emissions sustainably by 2050 by encouraging legislative and policy imperatives. ECLAC has supported the OPCC since its creation in 2021. Over time, we have seen the OPCC grow in the number of participating parliamentarians in countries represented and in the significance and diversity of its portfolio of activities. OPCC is now a wide network of Latin American and Caribbean parliamentarians and governmental technical officers who work together to strengthen their national environmental and climate change legislation by sharing knowledge, data, and good legislative practice. It also provides technical and high-level coordination and dialogue opportunities to enhance the region's climate ambition. We've lately been making every effort to promote even wider participation in the observatory because there are still many members of CARICO not yet part of this initiative. So this side event is an example of the OPCC organized high-level meetings that we are hosting in international forums all around. We were at COP in Dubai last year. For those not yet familiar with OPCC, our Honorable Gwendol Mercelina, who is an early enthusiast of OPCC, he will cover much of that detail in his presentation. So I won't go into much of that. So really, why are we here today? Why have we brought you all here today? Because investment in adaptation and mitigation initiatives towards achievement of just transition is expensive. And their returns have medium to long-term horizon. Our governments are heavily indebted, debt servicing rates are high. Where long-term low-cost financing is in short supply, we need to encourage local private investors or stakeholders to get involved if we are to better leverage public funds, so to finance the transition to a sustainable new low-carbon economic development paradigm. We need to ensure that there is a policy framework that encourages, inspires, and protects investors in adaptation and mitigation initiatives. We need to foster a more comprehensive, systemic, and integrated approach that will require change in national legislative frameworks. Modernizing national laws and regulations is crucial in de-risking, unlocking, and mobilizing climate finance to foster a just transition. Allow me to illustrate this by highlighting regulatory challenges in the energy transition. Outdated legislation governs the energy sector in many countries, maintaining a monopolistic, centralized, single utility model that inhibits progress. To transition to renewable energy sources, we need reforms that enable distributed generation, allowing multiple stakeholders to invest and contribute to a cleaner energy matrix, releasing capital that was simply blocked from accessing the energy market and unable to contribute to the energy transition. New energy legislation is required to allow private investors, households, and businesses to install solar voltaics and small-scale wind turbines, selling energy to the grid while meeting their energy needs. Furthermore, technological advancement requires laws and regulations that allow swift incorporation of innovation by existing new market players. So, for example, the promised revolution of electric vehicles. That can't happen without the reform of legislation concerning foreign trade, waste management, final destination, transport regulations, all those things. Our sentiment is aligned with the topic of SIDS4's interactive dialogue number 4, which speaks of making climate finance work for SIDS. We have asked our panelists this afternoon to present cases of Caribbean legislation and to demonstrate how these contribute to creating and enabling funding environment for climate finance in their respective countries. We are eager to hear their experiences, and we look forward to a very rich sharing of information. I want to thank you again all for coming. Welcome.
I'm sure you would agree that legislation is the foundation that we need to launch from. The pleasure is mine to ask the Honourable Dr. Natalia de Wheatley, Premier Minister of Finance of the British Virgin Islands, to take the floor, sir.
I thank you, Madam Moderator, and I recognize the protocol which you have ably established. Distinguished colleagues and delegates, on behalf of the British Virgin Islands, a co-host of this event, it is my distinct pleasure to warmly welcome you as we explore the topic climate change and environmental legislation in support of the delivery of the new program of action for SIDS. Allow me to first thank the team of the Parliamentary Observatory on Climate Change and Just Transition, convened by ECLAC, for organizing this event as it continues its great work to create spaces for policy and legislative dialogue among Latin American and Caribbean countries and territories. Legislation is one of the most powerful tools, as our Madam Moderator has illustrated to us. that we have in our arsenal to combat climate change and socially engineer the future we envisage for ourselves. For too long, we have been siloed in our efforts to craft legislative solutions to effectively respond to our evolving and complex challenges, including in the areas of environment and climate change. Two key factors in the equation of sustainable development that none of us can afford to ignore. The OPCC is doing great work to break down these silos and bridge the gap by allowing us to easily access, share, and learn from each other's legislative efforts. As an early and active member of the OPCC, the British Virgin Islands is both greatly benefiting from and contributing to this exchange, and I trust that our experience will inspire other Caribbean parliamentarians to join and become active participants. In this sub-region, we know well that we are not divided by the Caribbean Sea, but connected by it. Therefore, in my current capacity as chair of the OECS Ministers of Environment, I extend a special invitation to OECS parliamentarians and governments to participate in the OPCC and ask the OECS Commission's support in continuing to sensitize member states to the benefits. The British Virgin Islands is currently in the process of finalizing landmark comprehensive environmental legislation. The OPCC Legislative Tracker provides a rich database of regional environmental legislation that we will draw on as we refine some of the core innovative environmental management and enforcement mechanisms of our Environment and Climate Change Bill. While the Legislative Tracker is a great tool, the value of the OPCC is much more than this. For the British Virgin Islands, the OPCC has provided a valuable high-level forum, including at the recent COP28 climate change talks, through which we can raise awareness of some of the peculiar challenges that we face, including a lack of access to climate finance and more broadly, development finance. This issue of access is the single most important issue for the British Virgin Islands here at SIDS4. And we hope to leave this convening with the unequivocal support of the SIDS community on this issue. In our own case, we receive no budgetary support from the United Kingdom and are fully responsible for funding our response to the negative impacts of climate change and advancement of sustainable development. It is often assumed that the UK provides direct assistance to us, but that is not the case, despite our relationship. Additionally, our status as an overseas territory makes us ineligible to access the Global Environment Facility, the Adaptation Fund, the Green Climate Fund, or the Loss and Damage Fund. We are left to paddle our own canoe, so to speak, in the face of rising temperatures, more frequent and severe flood events, stronger hurricanes, sea level rise, and more, putting us in exactly the same boat of high vulnerability, irreversible impacts, and limited capacity to respond on account of our small size and fragile economies, as are all SIDS. We remain highly vulnerable to climate change and treat it as the existential threat that it is. Our hard-won development gains have already been eroded by flash floods and unprecedented storms like Hurricanes Irma and Maria, two Category 5 hurricanes, which wiped out 200% of the British Virgin Islands GDP in 2017 and caused $2.3 billion worth of damage. 7 years on, we are still actively recovering. The British Virgin Islands took on over $115 million in debt as a result of Hurricanes Irma and Maria alone, and much more capital is required to meet ongoing recovery needs. We are about to get a $100 million loan to help to support recovery efforts. To compound matters, based on the OECD rules, the British Virgin Islands is also not eligible to access concessional loans or receive grants. Climate justice demands this should change. Our experience speaks not only to our high vulnerability, but also to the importance and urgent need for international agreement on the multidimensional vulnerability index as a core tool to be used by donors when considering support to small, vulnerable islands. Recognizing the equal vulnerability of territories and embracing the MVI is the only way to ensure that all small islands fully benefit from the new program of action for SIDS and that no one is left behind. Implementation of the new program of action for SIDS will require innovative policy and legislative mechanisms, which is what we will discuss today. I'm proud that as a part of this forum, we will be sharing the Virgin Islands Climate Change Trust Act as an innovative approach to overcoming our barriers to accessing climate finance. In closing, let me remind you of the point I started with. The SIDS and low-lying coastal states of Latin America and the Caribbean, while diverse, share so many of the same development aspirations, vulnerabilities, challenges, and underlying values and ways of life, including our value of culture and connection to our lands. So let's commit to growing and continuing the work of the OPCC as a mechanism to share policy and legislative solutions so that together we can keep afloat in the rapidly rising seas. I trust that you will all find this evening's side event instructive and enriching. I thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Wheatley. I am sure that we have already found that to be so. You have elegantly and powerful manner illustrated the challenges that we have as vulnerable islands and what we share, connected not only by the Caribbean Sea, rather than see it as division, and also our culture and our values and our challenges of access to finance. Although many may think that we have access to the golden, my premier is laughing, to the gold that sits in the coffers in the United Kingdom. And the same challenges that he has illustrated for his island also obtains for us, who are also territories of the Britain. Okay? But be that as it may, we will paddle our canoe and we will rise because we are accustomed to rising above those waves. Yes? We are resilient people. And let us please ensure that when we embrace the MVI, that no one is left behind. And we hold the handle, not the blade. Be careful with the clauses. Read carefully. And
Thank you very much, Madam Veronica. I'm really happy. I don't know if I have to stand up or sit down, but I saw everybody sitting down. So I'll be addressing also behind my desk. But as you know, we're introducing the OPCC, the Parliamentary Observatory on Climate Change and Just Transition. But I also want to acknowledge the presence of the PGA, the Parliamentarians for Global Action. I'm also a member of it, and I'm really happy to see the team of parliamentarians who are here. I also saw the World Bank Director for Caribbean, but I don't see her anymore, but also the Island Innovation, James Elsmore. He was also here. And the UN Youth Ambassador of the Dutch Kingdom, Mr. Estasia. I'm grateful for having you guys here. As a member of Parliament of Curacao, I just am grateful to have been part and co-founder of the OPCC. Because the magic that happens when you are an environmental warrior makes everyone a little bit more aware we from the SIDS aren't really, when we're calling down, trickling down to our people as servant of the people, they don't understand what we're doing. But when you're a designer of the future, we have to talk about climate change. We have to talk about just transitioning. We're not only talking about energy, technology, the future of climate change, but we're talking just transition. For everybody, it has to be equal, and everybody has to feel safe. So yes, my name is Gwendolyn Marcelina, and I'm also a member of the OPCC, one of the co-founders, and I'm going to present to you guys the Parliamentary Observatory on Climate Change and Just Transition, the OPCC. And you ask yourself, why OPCC if it starts with Parliamentary Observatory? Because we can also talk Spanish, Observatorio Parlamentario del Cambio Climático en Latinoamérica y Caribe. Entonces, because we are part of the CEPAL, ICLAC, and that's why the OPCC honors the Spanish language in this case. But the OPCC is a network of lawmakers and governmental technical officers from the Latin America and the Caribbean, and for me especially the Caribbean, because the attention of the world has to be on our SIDS, because we're the most vulnerable within this position. And the OPCC's main goal is to bolster the region's environmental and climate change legislation. Currently, the OPCC has about 26 participating parliamentarians, and hopefully we are having more after today, and even more coming, and especially also technical governmental officers joining, and from 15 other countries. And the OPCC portfolio of activities and resources, we're going to explain how much, and I already heard from the BVI, which has been always supportive of the OPCC. Benito, my brother here, he was sitting next to me in Chile last, but it's important for you to see how important this platform not only is, but also how data-driven and innovative it helps us in our work. So one of the first activities of our portfolio, first part of our portfolio, is a network for knowledge building and sharing. The OPCC as network has been organizing several workshops. Last we had a workshop, it was virtually done through in Dominican Republic, strengthening legal framework to address the effects of climate change in the Dominican Republic. And we have the presentation of the Vice Minister Milagros de Camps, who oversaw and drafted the climate change framework law in the Dominican Republic. And she also, within this workshop, she showed us how they gathered all the information, how they changed various productive sectors and united them for the bill. It was very comprehensive, and it considered also the key environmental and social economic aspects, which most of the time we forget, but of the country, and she presented it with all the instruments and the innovations that it had. So the OPCC parliamentarians and technical advisors who reviewed and provided the suggestions also knew how to strengthen the draft that they were doing for the climate change framework in the Dominican Republic. So that's one of the examples that you see that we as the OPCC do in regarding knowledge building, but also sharing the knowledge that all the parliamentarians, several parliamentarians, countries have. But the other point is, and the other thing we use in our portfolio, is that we have an online database on information dissemination tool. And for me, you guys already have to take your phone and go to opcc.cepal.org. And you'll see, for example, the first founders who are Gladys Gonzalez from Argentina, but also Jacques Wagner from Brazil. And you have the information regarding everything that we have, not only from the participating countries, but extra countries that we have more information of. About 1,243 environmental laws, but also the framework, climate change framework laws that we have around 6, and there's about 386 bills and proposals. So if you go on and you're seeing information which is very valuable for you also to use, here's why we created this absolutely free. So it's free of charge. Nobody has to pay for this. So again, thanks to the heart of the good work of Sepal Eklak, we're making it possible for providing a tracker, a legislative tracker, which is, I think, something really unique. You haven't seen this easily before. A monitor that keeps all the laws regarding environmental and transitioning, energy transitioning. And that's very unique that we also have within our region. As you see, for the other part, the legislative tracker contains a database of environmental legislation, climate change framework, and bills undergoing in parliamentary procedures. So you see, for example, one of the most, this is the snapshot, like we got the snapshot of the website, the specific session of sustainable finance, and which is something we talk more about during the SIDS conference, but also here's where you see the action happens. And the OPCC database, there are 62 laws aligned with the topic on sustainable finance, of which 9 are in the Caribbean and 6 countries of the sub-region. And also, be advised that there will always be an update. So this will not stay static. We're always updating the information regarding the OPCC database, and then you'll see even more. So if you have more information, please provide it to us so we can put it also on the legislative tracker. And also I'm going to show some of the examples and the topics of sustainable finance legal instruments. So like we see, national funds, the creation of national funds, green taxes, which is also one of the most innovative things you can do with legislation, green insurance, making sure for that, as we know, for the loss and damages that are created and how more incentives we can create as legislators within our framework. Green insurance, carbon tax, payment for environmental services, tax deductions, making it more incentive for also companies to be more aware, environmentally aware, but also in the transitioning of having more, let's say, green energy and green economic solutions, access to credit and financing, but also non-refundable allocations. Because we all know within this process, we can become one of the biggest crisis, which is the climate change, but in the sense that everybody has to migrate. Today, we're talking in the SIDS that we have small island development states in a great amount, but if we're gonna wait for 10 other years, another decade, we never know that we're going to have the same amount of SIDS. So this is the reality we're facing, and we have to have some actions. Another example that we have to showcase are, for example, the Caribbean Sustainable Finance Laws. And we were talking already about the British Virgin Islands, the Environmental Protection and Improvement Fund Act was in 2017, but you also have in Barbuda, the Agriculture Development Fund Act in 2001, and Grenada Environmental Levy Act in 1997, Guyana Natural Resources Fund Act in 2021, so one of the recent ones, Virgin Islands Climate Change Trust Fund Act in 2015, but also, both of them are Virgin Islands, I'm sorry, and St. Lucia, the Environmental Protection Levy Act. So that's one of the things, but the other thing that we have in our portfolio for the OPCC is, again, just like my brother Premier from British Virgin Islands showcased, Mr. Wheatley, that we are a forum for high-level coordination and dialogue. Last time in COP, in COP, and COP28, but also you're gonna see how we came together in Chile. I went just in Chile for about less than 38 hours. So I arrived, yes, it was about 24 hours, I think, but in a flight for more than 12 hours from Curacao to Chile. And here you see the gathering of the first parliamentary summit on climate change and just transition in Latin America and the Caribbean. One of the most amazing settings where you talk and bring ideas onto the table, and now you see how it transcends into action through our legislative tracker and keeping everybody up to date in whatever we do and how we can bring change, not only for the parliamentarians, but also for the environmental officers within your government, which is very important. So don't feel that the OPCC is not attractive to you, but it's attractive to you as well. So the other thing is also the COP28 in Dubai. Here you see our brother Weekly standing next with our declaration and the leading role that we're doing with a side event at the COP28, just like we're doing right now at the SIDS, and hopefully we're gonna have much more of these events helping others to create and building new green and inclusive development within our region and beyond, because it's important as we're going to see we are all part of one world. There is no other earth than this earth. And to finish it up, the most important thing is an invitation to you guys. Please, if you know any parliamentarian within your country or neighboring countries, or any environmental officer within your government, tell them and let them know about the OPCC. Because it's important for us to endorse this project and create something within your own possibilities, within your own, let's say, information, everything that you want to see. So like as we gave you the opportunities that the OPCC activities have in the Caribbean, in the Latin America, but in the world, is OPCC as a network, as convening virtual meetings, events, workshops to explore common legislative solutions and opportunities for technical assistance. Again, I told you guys, CEPAL, ECLAC has the best team in the whole wide world. I've never seen a greatest team than this team. And also, you can also get OPCC as an information resource, which is compile reports and analyze cases for the Caribbean legislation, Latin American legislation related to climate finance, as we were talking about, but also OPCC as a forum for dialogue. Right now, we're looking forward for the participation at the COP26 in Azerbaijan. Hopefully, I'm gonna see more faces of you guys, and the collective drafting and release of the OPCC joint statement that we're gonna have again. The OPCC is ready and always available to support the Caribbean SIDS national legislative priorities, but also all the other SIDS within the world by engaging more participants from the region into our existing portfolio of resources and activities, and contributing with tailored support from the Caribbean legislative initiatives. So with this, I leave with you the QR code. Anything, you can just take a picture and later on go and seek for more information. This is the OPCC. You guys are welcome. Feel free, because we need more endorsement. We need more people joining, because the impact that we have to create is not only awareness, but it's in the actions that we want to see difference on climate change, but also on transitioning in a just world. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon to everyone. I'm standing in for Honorable Carl Dawson, who unfortunately, on account of his parliamentary duties, could not be with us today, but I hope I'm able to take his place. So today I'm presenting the Virgin Islands Climate Change Trust Fund Act, which we hope will be our small key to opening the big door of climate finance, which you've heard from our Premier, the very constrained position that we find ourselves in. So I won't repeat these points, but just to add that in addition to all of the barriers he expressed, on account of Brexit, we've also lost access to the EDF, the European Development Fund, which historically provided an important source of finance for us to meet our development aspirations. So in addition to that context, before I delve into the trust fund and the specifics of it, I just want to set the wider context that the Climate Change Trust Fund does not exist in isolation. We've worked very hard in the Virgin Islands to establish a fairly comprehensive architecture to address climate change. And that started with the establishment of a climate change committee approved by Cabinet as a standing committee in 2008. That committee has developed a climate change policy, which is updated on a 5-year cycle. It's currently being updated. And that policy is supported by an implementation plan. And there we set out in great detail the things that we want to do and prioritize for doing to address climate change, both in terms of adaptation and mitigation. The first iteration of that policy in 2012 actually called for the development of a sustainable financing mechanism to support the implementation of that policy. And from that, we now have the Virgin Islands Climate Change Trust Fund. And you'll see that the Act establishes a direct relationship between the fund and its purpose, which is to fundamentally fund the implementation of our policy. You'll see that the fund is an independent entity, and it's important that it is so, but there is a relationship with government providing high-level oversight, and that's through the function of the minister responsible for climate change, as well as the Minister of Finance, which at the moment happens to both be our premier. So he has a lot of power at the moment. Right, so just to give you a quick sense of the level of effort that has gone into this has been a 15-year journey for us. And I think part of the reason we're so excited to share our experience with you so that we can save you the trouble of having to go through a 15-year process yourself, and you can borrow from us. I remember being at COP15 back in 2009. This was actually the first time the Virgin Islands was engaging in the UNFCCC process and feeling very sidelined. And the group of OTs that were present, we sat around a table, I remember clearly, and realized that it wasn't going to be anytime soon. And in fact, here we are 15 years later, when our situation in terms of access would change. So we decided then and there that we had to do something to help ourselves paddle our own canoe. And the idea of the Virgin Islands Climate Change Trust Fund was born. And you can see from the timeline, we've acted very aggressively. It was formally called for in the 2012 policy. By March of 2015, and I have to say with the great support of the Caribbean Community Climate Change Center, which has been a tremendous partner of ours, we were able to have the Climate Change Trust Fund Act passed, and it came into force in 2016. By 2017, right before the hurricanes, we had the appointment of our first board of trustees who have worked in a very dedicated fashion. And notwithstanding the impact of 2 Category 5 hurricanes 2 weeks within each other, by May of 2018, with the support of the OECS Commission, we were able to see the operational manual, which is a legally established instrument under the Trust Fund Act, actually developed and approved by the board. And I have to say that this operational manual allows for the trust fund one day when we do have access to be able to be accredited at the level of the Green Climate Fund. So as I present, keep in mind that this is not just a mechanism of benefit to other overseas territories, but also independent islands in the Caribbean that may be interested in setting up your own fund that can have direct access to the Green Climate Fund, because the Trust Fund Act, as well as the operational manual, have been developed with that aspiration in mind. We have since been working to figure out the seed funding for our trust fund, right? Because that's not an easy cookie to crack. In December of 2018, there was the decision by Cabinet, which in principle decided that this would come from a levy that was being set up. And we're now moving through in this year the final phases of actually being able to get the first drawdown from that pot of money, which I'll go into, to be able to actually bring this trust fund to life, which we're hoping will happen by the end of this year. So just to give you a quick glimpse into the Act and what it provides for, in terms of the objectives, the trust fund really serves to provide a link between both domestic and international climate finance and our national climate change investment strategies. We say domestic and international because we appreciate that we have some skin in the game and we're willing to make contributions on an ongoing basis to this fund. I spoke about the trust fund being aspirational. So when you look at the act, you'll actually see language in there that says it serves as a national implementing entity for the Virgin Islands under the convention, right, being the Climate Change Convention. So the trust fund, like I said earlier, it's really there to support the implementation of our climate change policy, but it's a very flexible mechanism. So it can also support any innovative climate change initiative that may arise in the period when the policy is being updated. And I have to say, in terms of the actions that it supports, it's very broad. So in addition to physical adaptation projects on the ground, it recognizes the importance of things like capacity building, education, research, studies, public knowledge understanding, and supports those things. Importantly for us, it also works to support disaster risk reduction. It would be able to help us to respond to disaster events. So the next time around, we don't have to go out and get these very, very expensive loans in order to respond. And it also has special mechanisms to support the most vulnerable in our society. In terms of the sectors that it can support, it's all sectors embraced in our climate change policy, which you can see really touches on every facet of life in the Virgin Islands. I'll direct you to these websites, both the OPCC Legislative Tracker as well as bvi.gov.vg/climate change, so that you can have full access to the legislation, because time will not permit me to say all of the things that I would want to say, and you'd probably be interested in knowing about the Act. So I direct you there. So I'll just focus on sharing 5 key principles that underpin the trust fund, which are expressed in the Act. The first 3, transparency, independence, responsible resource management, are really fundamental to making sure that this trust fund is successful. Without these, we won't have confidence on the international arena that monies can be put into this fund, utilized for the intended purposes, but not only that, utilized in a manner that demonstrates value for money and sound financial management. So those principles are embedded throughout the Act. Also, we have structured this to allow for blended sources of finance, domestic and the widest possible sources of international finance that you can conceive. And in terms of who can access this fund, I think very special about our trust fund is it recognizes that government alone cannot adapt to climate change. We must provide a space where the private sector, NGO, other organizations, academia, can access resources to be a part of our adaptation journey. And so it allows for multiple actors to be able to access the resources of the fund. In terms of the operations, there are 2 legally required instruments to stand the trust fund up, those being the operations manual and the business plan. In short, the operations manual deals with matters of trust administration, fiduciary management, grant procedures, and guidelines. And the business plan looks at viable fundraising options, investment strategies, projected cash flows, strategic planning, annual budgets, proposed expenditures and disbursements, quite like a business plan that you would have for your business. Okay, and in terms of the mechanism through which it provides support, the trust fund is a granting mechanism. It does not provide loans. However, again, being very flexible in its design, the trust fund is able to partner with loaning institutions, so for instance, our national bank, to be able to support national level projects that could have direct benefits to the individual. At the moment, we're working at home to roll out the Solar Technology Energy Program, STEP, which will be done through our electricity cooperation. And the intention of that program is to entirely remove the upfront costs for homeowners to be able to put solar on their roofs. And this is something that we hope to finance and support through the Climate Change Trust Fund in partnership with our electricity cooperation. So this is a quick view, I don't have time to go through this, a quick view of the various matters covered in the operational manual and those covered in the business plan. And just quickly to touch on the structure, it's a very simple structure. At the highest level of governance is a board of trustees that has final decision-making power in terms of what is funded, but they're advised by a review committee, which is a blend of government technocrats as well as those outside government, and day-to-day operations are supported by a secretariat. You can see here the composition of the board. There's some government representation in an ex officio capacity, but the majority is comprised of private sector persons and persons from the NGO academia space. The operations manual sets out the structure of the secretariat, again in line with international standards. And I know I'm short on time,
Yes.
so I would have said a little bit more about the key principles that underpin, but I would just remind you that the trust fund legislation is available on the OPCC website and bvi.gov.vg/climate change. So you can go there and learn more about the fund. But we want to just encourage that you think about this model for your own countries or the territories in the room. The Virgin Islands was the only territory that was able to cross the finish line as it relates to development of a trust fund, but we hope that the other territories are soon able to join us and we can actually open up this key. At the moment, we have $4 million awaiting to be transferred to the fund, and we're looking forward to use that to show proof of concept over the next year to be able to leverage that to access much more on the international scene. So with that, I thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, what do I say? All-inclusive, good governance principles, local but thinking global, ensuring the standards is that of international finance standards, inclusive, access to resources, blended financing, grants versus loans, and partnership, collaborating. This was inspiring, instructive, progressive, aspirational, and it deserves that we stand and give our BVI sisters and brothers an applause. Not only are they here as part of OECS, but we are sitting close to the Minister of Finance, and BVI have independently as well contributed to this event. They deserve a round of applause. We are well able. Now you don't have to ask the pig, mother pig, why your snout look like that? Because it's already, no, I like mama. I like what mommy said. They will tell you mommy said that. So it's already laid out, and that is what we can do, collaborate to strengthen our region and move forward. Thank you. I will now move on and to the Dominican Republic. Regrettably, we are going to have a video. Our Honorable Milagros de Campos, am I correct? She's not here? Yes. Okay, our Vice Minister for Climate Change and Sustainability was unable to make it to SIDS4. She conveys her sincere apologies for being not here, but we will have a short video in which she will share with us.
First of all, I would like to thank everyone for their invitation to join this event today. I want to apologize as well, as I will not be able to attend because other matters are taking me back home. I want to speak up about the experience that the Dominican Republic has had on working with the OPCC, which has been increasingly helpful for us to achieve a strong legal framework for our climate change law. The Dominican Republic has been working on its climate change law for about 1.5 years now. This new legal framework is crucial for attracting and ensuring sustainable financing in the country. This is particularly significant in the context of the international financial system, which has been very challenging, especially for small island developing states and particularly for the Caribbean region, which faces more challenges because of our vulnerability. By focusing on this legislative instrument to unlock different investments, the framework is creating a conducive environment for attracting funding from various sources, including international organizations, private investors, international climate funds, but also local funds and commercial banks. It provides clarity, stability, and confidence to investors by establishing clear guidelines and regulations and incentives for climate resilient projects and initiatives. We have been able to develop what we call the financial strategy, the climate change financial strategy of the Dominican Republic, where we are channeling and redirecting existing funds to climate change adaptation and mitigation actions in the country. Additionally, it enhances transparency, accountability, and governance mechanisms, which are essential for ensuring that investments are effectively utilized and contribute to the country's sustainable development goals. Overall, this legal framework acts as a catalyst for mobilizing finance towards climate adaptation and mitigation efforts, thereby strengthening the country's resilience to climate change impacts while fostering sustainable development. In the process of exchanges with the different policymakers that we've had within the space for the Parliamentary Observatory on Climate Change and Just Transition, it has significantly strengthened the proposal of the legal framework, which we are proposing now to Congress. This engagement has facilitated the sharing of knowledge, different experiences, and best practices among the countries in Latin America and the Caribbean region. It has been fostering collaboration and mutual learning, and it's leveraging expertise and insights gained through interactions with the observatory. The Dominican Republic, with this experience, has been able to enhance the comprehensiveness and effectiveness and relevance of its legal framework to address climate change challenges. The exchange of information, of ideas from the policymakers of the different countries in the Latin America and Caribbean region has enabled us to identify the different gaps, to address concerns, and to incorporate innovative approaches into the framework. Overall, the partnership with the observatory has played a pivotal role in strengthening the legal framework and advancing regional cooperation and climate change mitigation and adaptation efforts. We want to thank deeply the OPCC for the help it has given the Dominican Republic in achieving a strong legal framework for climate change, which is of great importance to the government of the Dominican Republic. Thank you again.
We invite Mr. Travis Snickler. Do I have that correctly?
Sinclair.
Please, my apologies. Our Senior Environment Officer, Policy Research, Planning and Information Unit, Minister of Environment and National Beautification, Green and Blue Economy of Barbados, for his presentation. Addressing climate resilience to policy, institutional and legislative frameworks in SIDS and opportunities for knowledge exchange. We welcome you, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I really want to thank from the outset ECLAT and my friend Benito Wheatley, Premier again. I feel very honored to be joining you, the members of the OPCC, associated members of CARICOM. I think I must admit I was quite ignorant of the OPCC. Ionatas did reach out last year in terms of when he was putting together legislation, and so we were tasked in terms of providing those inputs. But I also want to, before I move on, I heard the invitation, Premier, to the OECS, and I'm a member of the OECS, also a member of CARICOM, so we look forward to also hearing that invitation to CARICOM countries. I think Ambassador Thompson, that you would have met, I think as our ambassador for climate change and a parliamentarian, I would like to encourage her to actually get involved as well.
Yes.
But again, deeply honored to be able to join you. I wanna, I see the OPCC as an institutional innovation in the context of the ABAS. And I don't know, the failure, I think, of this agenda has been to find the right institutional models to drive the SIDS agenda. I think this OPCC down the road perhaps could bring together SIDS. My Prime Minister has called for an assembly of heads. I think we need our parliamentarians on a more consistent basis from SIDS to find mechanisms to meet. Just simply wait for 10 years, I think, is insufficient. When our heads are opportunistically, when the AOSIS heads would be convened. Just on this matter of climate change, paragraph 6 of the ABAS spells out the issues of climate. Coastal erosion, extreme weather events, things that we deal with. And It also outlines a number of areas for action. There are about 8 to 9 areas of specific to climate action. We have water, food security, energy, infrastructure, health impacts, forest biodiversity, and disaster risk reduction. And so again, we have a good frame for action. And in terms of Barbados's response and what we've seen, those areas frame policy, programs, and legislation. So Madam Chair, it did go beyond legislation because I do believe there's a matrix of interventions that are required, and they all interplay with each other. But I also do that because I think Barbados has lagged in terms of its legal frame for climate. We have a history, and I did look at the observatory, and I could see the trajectory of legislation dealing with climate change. So I think it's a great resource. But there are gaps in terms of the regulatory frameworks, in terms of the institutional capacities, and I want to put our ECLAC director of the regional office, as I always do, just to serve notice that I think this is a great opportunity for ECLAC to help deal with those gaps across, and this is nothing unique to Barbados. And so I just want to talk about a couple of the programs that we have and a number of the policies. So specific to the matter of water, Barbados has a number of programs in the agricultural sector. You also saw reference being made to the Agricultural Development Act that provides financing to promote sustainable agriculture. But we also have our physical development plan, which really lays out the planning frame for the 166 square miles of Barbados in orderly fashion. And climate resilience has been built into the most recent physical development plan, 2021. In terms of policies as well, we have a national water reuse. Climate change hits Barbados beyond the coastal erosion, Madam Chair, and extreme weather events around drought. We have no surface water. We have a few streams. Some of you who might know Barbados, we rely on aquifers. And so at times of drought, we have 2 major drought events, the last one being 2008 and 2009, but we did have some water rationing the last 2 years in terms of just how to deal with this issue of drought. And we have one coming on our doorstep. So the water use policy is trying to look at how do we just pump water into the ocean once it's treated from our municipal treatment plants. And that has created some opportunities with the GCF coming on board to support 2 initiatives, and I'll mention one soon. The other thing as well is we have a stormwater plan, and we have our integrated coastal zone management policy framework. That Barbados being dependent on tourism, that policy framework that goes back to the 90s, 1998 to be precise, but based on a number of diagnostic studies going back as far as mid-80s, provide, again, institutional and policy direction dealing with a number of issues affecting the coastline of Barbados. Some of you may have heard the Roof to Reef program, very building on the Ridge to Reef program that we know so well. That again has been able to give rise to a number of support mechanisms like the Green Blue Bank, funded by the GCF. The idea is to scale that. We also have the Blue Economy Roadmap as well, supported by the IDB. And interestingly, we have a new financial instrument of debt for nature swap that has a blue bond that is in fact supporting again climate resilience as it focuses on the coastal environment. That has tied up the Barbados, right? Yeah, the Barbados Environmental Sustainability Fund. And I'd like, again, the Angela, what you presented, and I support the whole idea. I think we can learn from that. Where ours is fledgling, it is the blue bond will give rise to 1.75 million annually over the life of the bond, we're looking at $70 million US. Half of that is committed to marine spatial planning, and then to support our NGOs. In legislation, again, the blue bond is supported by two, the Conservation Finance Agreement, as well as the Conservation and Sustainability Agreement. Within those, again, climate has been integrated because we have natural disaster clauses, and with that. There are others, the Income Tax Act, the Charter of Barbados, as well as the ELPA, the Electricity Act, that allows for independent power production, Madam Chair. So I want to, as I began, there are gaps, there are institutional capacity issues, there are regulatory lags, and I think out of this, and in trying to honor the spirit of the Abbas, the capacity support is needed for SIDS to address those gaps. And so I really want to call on ECLAP,
Again?
the OPCC, to see this as a real opportunity as you begin to program going forward. The last point, and I framed the presentation around knowledge transfer. I showed this yesterday, but Barbados and Grenada were able to get a JEF project on SIDS, Green and Blue Economy Knowledge Transfer. So that mechanism will be rolled out. The idea, again, just to the Caribbean, for the entire SIDS space. And what it says is that with all these projects of investment, millions of dollars into the Caribbean, there's knowledge that you have, and we're calling for knowledge support. We're calling for knowledge transfer. And so this is one other institutional intervention. And I think, Diane, I'd love to see a link between this and the OPCC in terms, again, of how we could advance the overall SIDS agenda. Madam Chair,
Where's the funding coming from?
the JEF. And so it's these institutional interventions and innovations that I think that are really critical. With that, thank you.
And we move quite swiftly over to the Honorable Karine Z. James, as she shares with us her case of Grenada. Honorable, I welcome you, and please, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Madam Moderator, so eloquent. Good afternoon, everyone. I perhaps might or should start off by reinforcing a point that you made in your introductory remarks to our audience as it relates to parliamentarians and how, we have to ensure that we create strong parliaments and that our parliamentarians are. And so having served in both houses of parliament in Grenada as a former senator and now as a parliamentary representative, that statement could not have resounded, a clarion call even louder for us to stand firm and to stand strong, even when sometimes we might have to make unpopular decisions. So thank you for reminding us as myself and member of parliament for Curacao of that. I will be very brief in my intervention today, and so I, unlike my colleagues who eloquently expressed their case and gave some deep insight as to some of the things that they have been doing. And they have already highlighted as well some of the challenges that they face. I don't think I should reiterate some of it, but my intervention is dubbed as advocating for a plastic treaty that delivers for SIDS. I think that plastics has been a topic that we have not really collaborated on as small island developing states. And as my colleague from Barbados made mention into the Abbas document and how we need to ensure that the conversations for SIDS should not be a 10-year gap, I couldn't find it any more fitting than to just dub my intervention as a case for a plastic treaty. And so I particularly enjoyed BVI's approach to ensuring the enforcement for action through policy strengthening and enhancement by its adoption of the Innovative and Indigenous Climate Change Trust Fund Act. And so I think it really and truly gives us, an opportunity to look and see what has worked and what didn't work to shorten that gap or that journey for us. So Grenada, we aligned with these interventions that was made and has also put in place practical interventions linked to our work on our nationally determined contribution, our national action and adaptation plan, our national energy policy, our national biodiversity and strategy action plan, and our blue economy plan, amongst other relevant and new national policy and legislative work. And so we understand that establishing a robust policy framework backed by a comprehensive legal backbone ensures that we not only enforce the actions needed to adapt to the climate reality that we currently face, but directly allows for leveraging the right kind of financing, resource packages, targeted capacity building, technical assistance, science and technology innovations to close the budgetary and capacity gaps that continue to render us as vulnerable. We also understand that there is tangible meaning to the strong political will that these frameworks signal to the international community. Political will that, if leveraged correctly, will deliver strategic partnerships beyond the convention circuit to supplement our strategic approaches with new innovation, new thinking, and new models for locking in long-term, sustainable and impactful financing that blends both the private and public sector as well as necessary behavior change. And so that is something that we oftentimes don't place emphasis on, that relationship between the private and the public sector. Government cannot do it by ourselves on our own. So while not an exact departure from the focus on climate, I'd like to share some insights from the perspective of Grenada's participation within the current plastics treaty negotiations. And so in 2022, UNIA advanced the historic resolution 514, which placed us on a course to develop an internationally legally binding treaty to end plastic pollution, including within the marine environment. Thus far, we have completed 4 negotiating sessions, capturing key provisions on actions that, across the entire life cycle of plastics, from production to waste management, would ambitiously advance the mission of the treaty and the mandate of that said resolution. So here is why this treaty is relevant to today's debate. The first point that I'm going to make under this is that virgin plastic production is a significant contributor to greenhouse gas emissions. Thus, any mitigation action to reduce primary plastic production agreed to under the new plastic treaty will contribute to global mitigation measures. The second point that I want to highlight is that this treaty references ending plastic pollution to improve and enhance the health of our marine environment. We are all ocean states, right? And so our ocean is a major carbon sink contributing to atmospheric greenhouse gas reduction, deriding the atmosphere of problematic carbon dioxide at a cost. So all action to improve the health of our oceans also improve its ability to sequester carbon. So with this in mind and looking to the lessons of past conventions, captured within the zero draft of the new plastic treaty is a specific finance provision. Now this provision, it speaks to developing a robust finance mechanism that leverages financing from all sources and I stress again, both the private and public sector, which considers ways to improve on existing financial mechanisms. So for small island states, we have advocated for the inclusion of potential sub-funds as part of this finance mechanism, including a plastic implementation fund to advance the implementation of national action plans in SIDS and a remediation fund that allows for the remediation of existing plastic within our ecosystems. We've also strongly advocated for the inclusion within the financing provision of elements of that financing mechanism similar to what was developed for the successful Montreal Protocol, something that I don't think we speak about often in forums like these, right? So these elements include a dedicated multilateral fund that directly provides timely, adequate, predictable, new and stable financing to small island states, which is easily accessible and which supports enabling activities, cost of compliance, technical assistance, capacity building, training, and technology transfer. We've also asked the negotiating committee to consider practical ways for the fund to leverage financing from the private sector that is also predictable, timely, and adequate, and which considers the impacts of the sector and the responsibility to be a part of the solution to end global plastic pollution. So it is critical that the treaty establishes very clear guidelines on the role of private sector in advancing its objective. And so Grenada believes that it is very imperative that as we negotiate this legally binding instrument, that we use our unified voices to speak out against the status quo. We must consider whether existing financial mechanisms truly work for us in the way that we need, and we must ensure to start capturing all necessary changes and improvements at the point of negotiating, building true consensus between those countries most affected and those countries with the largest responsibility to remedy, and the industry they've directly encouraged for economic benefits. So with this in mind, we support the decision of the INC to focus technical work on financing within the next intersessional period of negotiations within a formal mandate that ensures that any progress or innovations achieved during the intersessional meetings can inform the final finance. Provisions within the treaty, right? So in this way, colleagues, our advocacy goes beyond a simple call to action for SIDS, and it cements the real actions needed to ensure that we are well equipped to face the battle of these triple planetary threats with long-term sustainable and robust financing. And so I would end my intervention by saying all of the projects that we want to implement, all of the programs that we want to implement are well and good. Our call for better structured and more easier accessible financing mechanisms is all well and good. But if we don't have the legislations that guide that, we are just talking. Yes? So with that, I would say thank you. And I'm happy that I've been here to hear all of the presentations and to actually learn from my colleagues. One of the key programs that stood out to me was the STEP, and my dear friend from BVI promised to befriend me now so that she can and so we're happy for this. We are happy for these dialogues to actually learn as to what worked and what didn't work so that we can really and truly show up and show out for ourselves as small and developing states.
Thank you, Honorable Minister Karine James. I am quite sure all of us here would support the case for advocating for a plastic treaty. It's an opportunity for collaborating and challenging the status quo and building consensus. We thank you again for the call to action, that we are well equipped for long-term sustainable and robust financing, again, supported by legislation. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we'll segue into our question and answers, unless you're truly satisfied and you wish to do that elsewhere. So you can we'll hear from you. The show of the hand.
Dawn P. Nathaniel. I am the Chief Sustainable Development and Environment Officer at the Department of Sustainable Development in St. Lucia. So thank you so much for the effort here in putting on this event. It has been quite useful. OPCC, ECLAC Caribbean, and collaborators. So really happy to be part of it and to see the strides that have been made by the OPCC in the data knowledge and information, but also in what they hope to see in moving forward in terms of dialogue, in terms of coordination and greater support to the region. So that is quite commendable. And thank you also to all of the speakers. I quite enjoyed the event. For us in St. Lucia, I do want to say that we have just enacted our legislation. Our climate change legislation was passed, Climate Change Act number 3 of 2024. So in our case, it is a framework that allows for the implementation of the Paris Agreement, the UNFCCC, the Kyoto Protocol, and so on and so forth. So it provides that overarching framework. So it's a little different from some of what I heard today in terms of a piece of legislation that allows for the attracting of funding, which is really needed for the Virgin Islands and others, for all of us, really. So we do also have a lot to learn from that experience. The question I wanted to ask, based on what I heard from Virgin Islands, as well as from Dominican DR, as well as from Travis from Barbados, and in the interest of time, I won't ask all the questions I was thinking of. I'll probably be shot by someone in here. But I do want to ask the question of, given that you're looking at the legislation that is looking to attract funding to allow you to implement, what about issues to do with carbon markets and issues to do with loss and damage? Have you considered this in what you've put together so far? And if you haven't, are you looking to make amendments to incorporate that, given that the climate landscape is moving in that direction? Thanks.
I can say a little bit about legislation for carbon markets. One thing we're doing right now, because we are overseas territory of the United Kingdom, we presently have an exclusive fishing zone, which we are transforming to an exclusive economic zone, and that will require legislation to be able to do that with the President of the United Kingdom. But that's very important in the whole carbon markets, because, especially for the marine assets, because you will have to formally establish ownership in a situation like that. And then there are other things we're going to be doing. I'm not quite sure whether they'll require legislation, but we're working with some private sector partners who will be engaging with organizations like KPMG, etc., to have a proper metric for valuing the assets, because I know that has been a challenge in the carbon markets. What is actually the price of the particular asset? I think it's an interesting question you've raised. I think we do have to consider some legislative measures engaging in the carbon markets, or perhaps even on a multilateral level, considering the fact that this is cross-national type activity. I'm not sure if anybody else wants to add to that as it pertains to legislation for carbon markets.
I'll just add quickly from the Virgin Islands side, in addition to what Premier said about us starting to explore our blue carbon potential and sort of set up an EEZ to really allow us to benefit most from that. As it pertains to the trust fund and being able to attract or benefit from any revenues from the carbon market, it is structured that way. So it's highly flexible. In fact, I'm looking at the list of sources that the fund can raise monies from, and there's a nice line, you know, the line in your job description that says any other duties assigned. There's a line at the end of the list that says any other sources of revenue deemed appropriate by the board. So I think this really leaves it wide open, including looking at the carbon market. I would note though, at the moment, because of our OT status, we're really only able to participate in a voluntary carbon market, which of course is very small compared to the formal market set up under the convention. So there's still some constraints from our perspective to really benefit from that space.
Yeah, if I could add, so Barbados was an emergency, under the Emergency Act, a disaster fund, but I think that has since been integrated, the notion of it into the National Insurance Scheme. We are members of CRIF, and so that provides some level of support. We brought these things following St. Kitts, I believe, at Dominica, of these natural disaster clauses, and I think that gives some level of support in loan where you actually freeze the interest payment at the instant of a natural disaster. So that is something that we've looked at. But I'll be honest with you, Dawn, we've walked around this issue of carbon markets. I don't know where Trinidad is, Roanna, with this, but I think the region, I really think that we're talking about it, but no one has stepped forward to put something in place. I think the government of Bahamas, through Article 6, is looking at some activity, but is it feasible for us? And can we do it together? And I think that's something that we should look into.
I have here little booklets. Jonathan has copies for anybody who wants to get a copy. This speaks to the research that we have done at ECLAT on carbon markets. And in fact, the head of my economic unit, Sheldon, was in a side event this morning with CARICO, discussing the potential for carbon markets in the Caribbean. What we have discussed here is, because it's something we're trying to encourage in the region. And what we said is that you can either go the national route or you can go the regional route. We're advocating the regional route, which is why we're hooked up with CARICOM. And we're thinking that because, the sinks and so on, well, we share a lot of the sinks because we share a common ocean space. And then, there are some of us, like Guyana and Belize, that have more forest cover than the rest. We think that it is a good idea for us to go into creating a carbon market that is regional. But that doesn't prevent national initiatives from cropping up. Ultimately, we get to that point. But we have a full document, 80-odd pages, prepared by Sheldon and his team, that you can go on our website and find. But there's also a little summary here that gets you in the game, gives you just a general idea of where we're going and where the region should begin to think about going. But that doesn't stop Rwanda from saying what Trinidad is doing. Y'all not doing anything.
So I'm just gonna speak a little bit on behalf of the OECS. Chamberlain unfortunately is ill and couldn't be here. We wanted to be part of this panel this afternoon. So just to say that we think OPCC and what they're doing is excellent. It actually supports something that we started, or mandated to start last year at a regional parliamentarian caucus that we now have, which goes across the aisle. It's just members of parliament, so both opposition and those currently at the helm of government. And OECS has created this caucus in order to discuss all issues that affect our member states. And it started last year and will continue with at least one meeting annually, but we're aiming for 2 meetings to discuss the issues of the region. Further to that, along with what has been produced by ECLAC, OECS has actually launched a coalition. So we are also attempting a regional approach towards carbon markets. So all the countries sit on this coalition, and there is, for the next couple of years, going to be a lot of capacity development, understanding what the markets are, how we're going to access it, in the hope of creating another regional market. And as many avenues for access as possible is what's most important to us. So I'm just hoping that we can continue our work with ECLAF. We worked on quite a bit, but definitely in the implementation of the ABAS with our member states. We're hoping to continue to do that, and of course with OPCC.
Thank you so very much. Mrs. Dawn Pierre Nathaniel, Chief Sustainable Development and Environment Officer at the Ministry of Education, Sustainable Development, Innovation, Science, Technology, and Vocational Training of St. Lucia. to kick off our discussion. Regrettably, we have to respect your time, and we truly appreciate you being here with us. So please allow me a few more seconds. I am hoping that this side event was as inspiring, that you were challenged, called to further action, because we see that there's a lot of action going on, and that it shed light on our innovative legislation and policies, as we heard from the BVI and Barbuda reminded us that at times we take the steps and move with policy. That the roles in creating a positive funding environment for building resilience and stronger institutional capacities to face the challenges posed by climate change is not above us. We are more than well able. Despite the challenges posed, I believe we can all leave this session with the understanding that great progress is being made in the Caribbean and Latin America. It is now time to strengthen our initiatives and mobilize efforts to advance even further. Please be sure to count on the OPCC in supporting all our Caribbean countries in advancing the legislative priorities or policies. Let us seek to strengthen our collaborative alliances in advancing this work which we have begun. I want to further reinforce and extend the invitation extended by our colleagues to join the OPCC. Please allow me to reiterate our appreciation and thanks to our honorable ministers, members of parliament, our distinguished colleagues, and you, ladies and gentlemen. We could not have done this today. I register our gratitude and our deepest appreciation to the United Nations, ECLAC, the Government of the Virgin Islands, OECS, and OPCC, the Parliamentary Observatory for Climate Change and Just Transition. Ladies and gentlemen, one more little thing, yes.
Just one little word of thanks to you, first of all, for your dynamic. I need to thank Premier Wheatley and his entire team from BVI. Wonderful collaboration that we have enjoyed. I really also want to express my appreciation to our panelists,
Yes.
Wendell, as well as Mr. Angela, and the minister, Mr. James.
Yes.
Yes, meeting you all for the first time. Very, very happy to have had you. I cannot let you leave without acknowledging the work of my two little beavers, Jonatas and Gabriel. I don't care. Really long service in putting this together, and I really want to express my appreciation for that. And thank you all. Thank you all for staying.
Thank you so much. This is not the end, but the beginning of a new journey with you. And so I adjourn this meeting. Sign the line.